Hello, I'm Karim Fazakir and you're watching All 24 special coverage on China, UN's escalated tension over Taiwan. For China, nothing matters more than restoring its place in the world as a great power. It was put on mute for centuries, but now it's rich, it's armed, and it's back in a really big way. Its only pure rival is the US. One of the priorities of its leader is to reunify all of its territories and squash any rivals. And one of the biggest thorns in its side has been Taiwan, which some believe it should be an independent state. The US, for its part, doesn't openly support the independence of Taiwan. Yet, in American policy called strategic ambiguity, Taiwan exists in purgatory. It has self-rule, but China wants to take it back, while Washington says it's committed to the status quo. So as the American commitment to Taiwan is about to be tested, what are the repercussions of a showdown between the world's biggest powers? Today we're talking with Mr. Far Kim Bang, a founder and a chairman of Strategic Pan Indo-Pacific from Malaysia, and Dr. Julia Rokinvad, an assistant professor at Nottingham University from Malaysia as well. Gentlemen, madam, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to this debate. A short break and we get down to discussion. So let's begin with the latest news before we delve into any kind of discussion. The tension in Taiwan has dominated discussions of foreign ministers at the meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has called for maximum restraint as China escalates its response to what it described as a provocative move by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to visit Taiwan earlier this week.
The United States continues to have an abiding interest in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. We oppose any unilateral efforts to change the status quo, especially by force. We remain committed to our One China policy, guided by our commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 communiques, and the 6 assurances.
So let's kick it off with you, Mr. Far Kim Bang. What is this pinprick to China mean to you? And what do you think will come out of it?
Well, with regards to the relationship between China and Taiwan, and alternatively, China and the United States, the scenarios do not look good either way, because when it comes to one of the most important issues in Chinese public policy or foreign policy, or the decision-making writ large, Taiwan ranks the highest in terms of its strategic importance and also the historical symbolism and substance that are attached to this issue.
Very nice indeed. Back to you, Dr. Julia Rokinvad, sorry. Do you think that Nancy Pelosi is trying to outflank President Biden and trying to make foreign policy on her own in a very, let's say, unusual way?
Well, thank you for the question, and pleasure being with you. I've been thinking about it myself a lot. What could the actual reason be with another war, the real war going on in another front, for Speaker Nancy Pelosi to visit Taiwan in such a provocative manner? And probably since she's second in the role, one of the highest ranking officials in the United States, is to play her own game. But it looks like it's a kind of a move taken from some old playbook in politics and international relations, where there is an attempt to drive away attention from domestic problems by this current trip. And indeed, Nancy Pelosi succeeded in that. The whole world, including us, is talking about it. But I'm not sure in the new circumstances how receptive the American public would be to that, because I can see there are concerns raised and a high level of criticism against this trip, against this highly provocative trip in the United States itself, because the country is ridden exactly with its own problems. And this trip apart from the utter provocation, doesn't solve anything. So that still remains a question to me myself as well.
And Dr. Julia Roknifad, with cross-strait relations between China and Taiwan at its worst in over 40 years, is there a real risk of a conflict?
I don't think so, because one real conflict is already ongoing, and you can see how after discussing it over and over again, the Russian so-called special operation in Ukraine, we are slightly and deliberately shifting towards other topics. I think what we are seeing now is a war of provocations. One provocation coming with Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, another provocation from China, who quickly set up the military drills, practically blockading, not completely, but to an extent blockading Taiwan, another provocation. But I think that's all what the parties are capable of at the moment, because we've seen the United States to what extent, how far they are able to go in the real conflict in Ukraine. And that's practically it, with Russia still advancing. And as it comes to China, I don't think China is ready to make the real move and to occupy Taiwan by force, to retake Taiwan by force. So I think it is as far as it can go. And when on Sunday the drills will be over, we will get back more or less to the status quo.
And back to you, Mr. Far Kim Bang. While the United States continues to declare support for the existing international order, U.S. action indicates much more ambivalent and at times hostile attitude towards the web of multilateral bodies, organizations, and institutions that have shaped the post-World War II period. What did U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan achieve anyway?
Well, the United States will always try to enunciate the view of the position that they are all for the maintenance of the international legal status quo. In other words, all countries and entities that are even partly in the process of the international relations, such as research organization, think tanks, so on and so forth, everyone should conform to the rules and principles of the international legal order that have been the mainstay of the world order since the end of 1945. The United States will always say that. However, the United States is beginning to realize that the world is now facing issues such as inflation with regards to the price of fuel, food, animal feed, fertilizer. To sum it all up, you could refer to them as the 4F. When United States feel domestically challenged in that way, and United States is one of the contributing factors to all these crises that are now being exported or globalized all across the world, then the United States will always maintain its rhetoric, righteous rhetoric, but on the other hand, conduct any tactical maneuvers that are necessary. And when I'm referring to United States, I'm referring to some politicians, not all of the United States, because Americans at large are also suffering from the crisis of 4F, the rising prices of food, fuel, fertilizer, and even animal feed. And it can actually lead to a vicious cycle of worse income distribution in the United States. So bear in mind, when I speak about United States, I'm referring to the tactical maneuver or swagger of some politicians, by Dr. Julia earlier, that domestic politics in the United States has a lot to do with the current visit of Nancy Pelosi to to Taiwan.
Very nice. And Dr. Julia Roknifad, China said Friday that more than 100 planes and 10 warships have taken part in live-fire military drills surrounding Taiwan over the past 2 days. Taipei termed China's military exercises around the island, or the island nation, highly provocative. China was set to press ahead Friday with its largest ever military exercises encircling Taiwan, despite firm statements of condemnation by the United States, Japan, and the European Union. In this context, and since you told me that it is unlikely for escalations to go any further, how can you explain the threats and the strong statements from China's officials over this visit? And what are they trying to signify here? How far the permanent tensions between China and the US could go?
Well, you probably have seen those multiple attempts to humiliate China on this occasion, to say that China hasn't got, if to put it mildly, what it takes in order to demonstrate force, to demonstrate its decisive stance on the matter. However, I think what the observers and the attackers from the propaganda outlets anti-China propaganda outlets are missing is that China has got a totally different strategic culture. China is a long-standing country, is a long-standing state with a long experience of statehood. China has got time, trust me. And if China stated that it's going to reunite with Taiwan, I think it actually will, despite these provocations. So I don't think that these humiliating remarks coming from certain channels are of any consequence. Of course, they are upsetting, and China is upset, and it's demonstrating by the ongoing drills how upset it is. But on the other hand, it's, and I think that's what deserves credit here. It's not provocative enough. And China has got enough strategic wit not to get into this immediately, while clearly understanding it hasn't got enough resources to take over Taiwan by force. That's why it embarked on the other provocation. On the other hand, I think it actually will even play into the hands of Chairman Xi Jinping in the upcoming elections, because he's planning to stay there, and he can play on the sentiment that he needs to protect one of the most important items on the agenda of the Chinese state. So I think the limit here has been reached in this war of provocation, and more or less it will go to the status quo until the time that China is ready to actually reunite with Taiwan. It would prefer it, I believe, to do so without the use of force, but if need be, it will be prepared to use force, but it will take time.
And Dr. Kim Bang, does America now have the obligation to defend Taiwan if there is force used by China here?
Well, that's the 64 million questions, as they put it. By legal definition, the Taiwan Relations Act, the United States does have the responsibility to come to the aid of Taiwan. In one of the 6 assurances of Taiwan and United States actually agreed to provide the necessary weapons and defense platforms to strengthen the military preparedness and also capability of the of Taiwan. But then when it comes to the distinction of what is defensive and what is offensive, the line is not very clear. So for instance, if you sell more jets, advanced fighter jets to Taiwan, in order to create a balanced military or balance of power between Taiwan and China, are you actually promoting Taiwan to be bolder and bolder, to be independent in their approach in international relations, which is what China does not want?
And since Taiwanese authorities keep saying openly that Taiwan is an independent nation or a sovereign nation, according to you, in your view, how likely is the reunification? How long do you think it's going to take? And is it going to be peacefully?
Is that question?
Yes.
Yes,
Dr. Kim.
Yeah. Well, reunification is high on the agenda of the Chinese Communist Party, but also throughout the whole of China, and if I may say so, throughout the whole overseas Chinese world or the Sinic world. The issue is the method or the mechanism of reunification. For instance, there used to be a so-called one country, two system with regards to Hong Kong. But then from the interpretation of certain quarters in Hong Kong, that platform of one country, two systems has already been undermined by the introduction of a National Comprehensive Security Law last March 2021. Now, both sides usually insist that reunification is something that are on the agenda on the two countries, but then for the first time last year at the National Party Congress in China, the word peaceful reunification has also been dropped by President Xi Jinping, which means all cards are on the table. Mm-hmm. China will resort to all options to seek reunification so that the concept of one China can always be maintained, even if Taiwan may not necessarily be reunited with the motherland of China immediately, mm-hmm. or in the medium future.
Mm-hmm. And according to you, Dr. Julia Roknifad, do you think that the integration of Taiwanese people is going to be that easy? We know that they are the same people. Chinese, Taiwanese are all the same people, but the system of government there is not the same. Do you think that their integration, in case it is reunited with China, is going to be easy?
That's also quite an interesting question because indeed it depends on the sentiment of the people over there. If we are to talk about the peaceful option without the use of force of the reunification of Taiwan with the mainland China. However, looking at the trends, at the current trends, support of the United States, massive weapon supplies, it looks like the moment is going to be deferred. And probably eventually it will have to be done with the use of force. It's just, as I said earlier, I think the only thing deterring China from reuniting by the use of force with Taiwan is that it very reasonably assesses its chances and its capacity. And it realizes it needs to build more because it doesn't have enough to carry enough troops, enough weapon supplies throughout the straits. It's 180 kilometers, and it needs certain capacities for that, which it knows it doesn't. So that would be quite pointless to undertake this step right now. But and it doesn't reflect my personal position, but it looks like in the long-term perspective or even mid-term, the reunification of the two is going to be quite inevitable. Probably it's going to run with the scenario with the use of force.
Mm-hmm. And in a different development, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated on Friday the U.S. will not be provoked by China's actions after the country launched what it called drills. Blinken also stated that Pelosi's visit was peaceful and did not represent a change in American policy toward Taiwan, emphasizing that U.S. will continue to support cross-strait peace and stability and a free and open Indo-Pacific.
The United States will not be provoked. We'll continue to do what we've done for a long time. We'll support cross-strait peace and stability and a free and open Indo-Pacific. You'll see that in the days and weeks ahead. We will stick by our allies and partners and work with and through regional organizations. We'll continue to conduct standard air and maritime transits through the Taiwan Strait, consistent with our longstanding approach to working with allies and partners to uphold freedom of navigation and overflight, which has enabled the region's prosperity for many decades. One of the participants in the East Asia Summit and ASEAN regional forum meetings, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, visited with regime leaders in Burma just a few days ago, calling them a friendly partner. That directly flies in the face of ASEAN's hard work to bring the violence to an end. It's in the interest of all countries and people in Southeast Asia, the broader region, the Kremlin end this aggression and its painful global consequences. We've heard many countries here condemn aggression, just as they did in joining 141 countries at the United Nations for a UN resolution supporting Ukraine and calling for an end. to aggression.
Back to you, Dr. Julia Rocknifard. On Myanmar, Blinken explained that countries have to increase economic pressure to do more to stop the flow of arms and revenue to the regime, and not to endorse the sham elections that will take place next year, as he criticized Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visiting with Myanmar's leaders a few days ago. How do you read the situation in this?
Do you have a particular angle in this reading that I could clarify on?
Yes, so technically it appears that perhaps we are repeating the same scenario that of Russia and Ukraine conflict. Could war erupt over Taiwan over there, and what would provoke this in particular? And why do you think Blinken is criticizing Lavrov's position here regarding, let's say, supporting Myanmar?
I think we're talking about several things here together. First of all, despite all the concerns flaring in the air that China would like to decide to take over Taiwan, seeing what Russia has been doing in Ukraine, as I said, I don't think China is prepared to do so. There is a distinguishing feature between the two conflicts, one ongoing, one potential one, is that, from history, we know Taiwan, we can state that it traces different history with China if compared to Russia and Ukraine. And also Russia and Ukraine, that simple but very important difference, they share land border. China and Taiwan do not. And this is what makes some kind of operation very difficult in here. As we discussed, I don't think any kind of conflict going to occur here so far. And even if it did, we've seen the accent of the preparedness of the United States to participate. They were able to send loads of weapons to Ukraine, and nevertheless, it didn't have significant effect. So the questions are being raised to the effectiveness of such an approach. And for now, those talks were also depleted by this help rendered to Ukraine, which the United States would not be able to send the same amount of support that it did to Ukraine to Taiwan should conflict arise. But again, I think it would not. Besides, sanctioning China would probably prove even more difficult task than sanctioning Russia, which failed to the point. We've seen that most actors, international actors in Asia, did not join the anti-Russian sanctions. And in the case of China, who is the major trade partner for many Asian nations, that would prove even more difficult to isolate it in this regard. So I don't think we can compare the two. Well, another layer of it that you referred to, the criticism towards Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. I think Russia keeps doing what it has been doing, proving that it's a reliable, neutral, very reasonable actor, even when it comes to ASEAN, not only to the Middle East, where it has been prominent for the past year since its operation in Syria, or with its decisions in the near abroad when it comes to Ukraine, for example. It's trying to demonstrate to the rest of the world that it's still in the game. It's not isolated. It won't be so easy. And given the nature of the current tensions between the United States and Russia, it's only natural that we hear such things from Secretary Blinken.
Thank you indeed. And Dr. Far Kim Bang, do you have a sense of how the past 7 months or so in Ukraine have changed the way people in Taiwan, or the government of Taiwan, or maybe even the government in mainland China think about this issue?
Thanks for the questions, but I think you were referring to Taiwan, not Thailand, right?
Yes, Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Yes.
Okay. With regards to Taiwan, ever since the military action or war invasion or whatever you call it, depending on which side you are taking, there has been a sea change in the geopolitical and geoeconomic view of all the member states in ASEAN Regional Forum, and they consist of 27 of them. Not as many as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that has 30 member states, but there has been a sea change in ASEAN Regional Forum, where the Secretary of State of the United States, Anthony Blinken, is actually obliged to attend every year, which is held around June or July. So coming back to the original issue, there's the current tiff, the conflict between Taiwan and United States, or United States and China, the triangle, so to speak. Has that actually increased the tension, geopolitical and geoeconomic tensions of the region and across the world? The question, without a doubt, is yes, which is why the United States must exercise maximum and even extreme restraint, if possible, from provoking China.
And Dr. Julia, please, since 1979, the United States acknowledged the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China, recognizing the One China policy. The One China policy has subsequently been reaffirmed by every new incoming U.S. administration, yet we see that the U.S. is continually, let's say, arming Taiwan, and affirmed in multiple occasions that it will interfere militarily if China attempts to invade the self-ruled island. What are your observations with regard to the U.S. double standard here and paradoxical position, if we may say so?
Well, the United States like to call it a policy of strategic ambiguity, not a double standard like some in the world might say. Yeah. So I think in the mind of the United States administration, and we can see there is even some kind of differences between Nancy Pelosi, her decision to go to Taiwan, and the White House. So it can't be totally, it could be not totally unified monolith kind of opinion. But I don't think any kind of escalation, as I said earlier, can arise in a short-term perspective due to, again, the lack of capacity on the Chinese side, and China understanding it very well. And also, as I said earlier, I think we've seen until what extent the United States are ready to go in order to try and curb or quench the conflict in their favor. How it happened with their support to Ukraine. Why, for example, we might be asking ourselves, there were not further reinforcements, support sent to Ukraine in order for Ukraine to stand its ground against Russia. Why troops were not sent there? We know that that would possibly lead us to the Third World War. So this is what detains the United States from sending further reinforcements and providing casus belli for multiple parties in that. So I think what we're observing now, that's it. As Dr. Falkenberg just said, that indeed it makes the situation even more polarized, provided the context also that President Xi Jinping and President Vladimir Putin met right before Russia announced a special operation in Ukraine. And apparently the two reached to some kind of conclusion. Probably Chairman Xi was aware of what's going to happen in Ukraine, because they had a very cordial conversation upon their personal meeting, and they are ready to render their support to each other. And in case, if actually there is some move made by some of the parties that would spark a conflict, I also don't think China is going to react very well. So it's rather a war of bluff, a war of words, a war of provocations, but not more than that at this point.
And as a final question before we wrap up our special coverage, Dr. Falkenberg, China has announced unspecified sanctions on U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for her visit to Taiwan. And Chinese Foreign Ministry statement said Friday that Pelosi had disregarded China's concerns and resolute opposition to her visit to the self-ruled island, which Beijing claims. However, is Xi Jinping prepared to go the extra mile? Perhaps what is holding Xi Jinping back from launching a military operation in repercussions over this, let's say, visit?
Well, there are several scenarios here. There's always the likelihood of an accidental warfare. For instance, China actually launched 9 missiles into the Sea of Japan, and 5 of them actually landed in the exclusive economic zone of Japan. That makes Tokyo extremely unhappy. So precisely because of this trip, the relationship between China and Japan has also been affected. And one also has to bear in mind that from the perspective of the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, there is already a plan that is in motion where China is actually being encircled. So Foreign Minister Wang Yi referred to it as 5-4-3-2-1 formula. The 5-Eye Alliance, the Quads, the AUKUS between Australia, United Kingdom and United States.
Well, apparently we lost Dr. Far Kim Bang. Thank you so much, Dr. Far Kim Bang. Julia, thank you so much for joining our special coverage. We reached the end of our show for today. For more updates, you can follow us on our social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook and Twitter. Bye for now.